Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Choose Courage Inc. And in this episode, I'm just going to flow a little bit. I'm going to share a little bit about my journey from kind of challenging my understanding of what a dream job is, what the dream life is, and how I started to make a switch and move closer towards a life that I can truly say that I love, with no caveats, no footnotes or anything. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about a couple truths. I'm going to be talking through the truth behind golden handcuffs, identity crises, and the healing work that nobody talks about when they glamorize entrepreneurship. So this episode, it's raw, it's honest, it's personal. I'm vulnerable in different parts of it as well. This isn't just about metrics or milestones. And some of the things I'm reflecting on is about liberation. It's about agency and what it takes to create a life you don't need to escape from. Within this episode, I also share just some practical exercises that I do with myself, as well as some things that I've done with my coaching clients. So feel free to pause as you need to, as you're listening to this episode, to follow along with the exercises and to have your own moments of reflection and introspection. And if during this episode, you're starting to get curious about entrepreneurship, if you're starting to get curious about what it would look like to bet on yourselves and to take your idea into something real, then I'd like to encourage you and invite you to get curious about my upcoming group coaching cohort for entrepreneurs who are wanting to take their idea into something real, or for those early stage entrepreneurs who are recognizing I need to recalibrate some things and I need to design something that will not only be profitable, but will also be a healing experience to me. And so you can learn more about that at choosecourageinc.com. And on there too, you can also find a link to schedule a one-on-one with me. And we'd love to just vibe and just kind of talk to you about your dream and what's going on for you. Nonetheless, if you've ever asked yourself, is this really all there is as you look at your life and the ways that you're living it, then this episode's for you. So continue listening as we talk about the real revolution, which is choosing a life that actually feels good to live. Let's get it. So earlier this week, I'm sitting here in Mexico, now legal resident, approved for a house, and finally just honestly in a flow, in a routine, and something hit me that I can say that I love my life without disclaimers, without caveats, for the first time in so many years. And it made me think, what if the dream job is the real trap? What if the real revolution isn't climbing the corporate ladder, but burning it down and building your own freaking staircase? And so in this episode, I want to share parts of my story, how I went from carrying 75 plus pounds of depression and stress weight in corporate America to building a near seven-figure business, winning a FASCO award without paying to play, and moving to a country where I wake up feeling and being more free. But this isn't about metrics. This is about the internal transformation. I kind of want to just get a little honest about what was slowly killing me throughout the years. And so today I want to be speaking to those who look successful on paper, but feel hollow on the inside. I want to speak to those who are wondering, is this all that there is? And if you're there, you're not out of pocket. If anything, you're starting to wake up. And it can feel like a really uncomfortable place to be in when you are starting to question all the things that at one point felt so, so good. Because the dream job, sometimes it's just a well-marketed nightmare with good benefits. But the real dream is a life you don't have to escape from every Friday and dread returning to on Sunday. And I'm not talking just about work with this. This is about how you design a life where you're excited about, where you're like, yo, this feels really good. Where as you remember how short life is, you're looking at yours and saying and thinking, I'm making the most of it. And so let's talk about it by diving into a topic that will make some of us look at the scars and others notice the bruises on our wrists. I want to talk about the golden handcuffs. But first, let me paint a picture of who I was in the UX industry. On paper, I was crushing it. Six-figure salary, respected in my field, working on projects that looked impressive in my portfolio. I had the LinkedIn profile that made other people curious, other people want to reach out. But in reality, I was a creative person doing uncreative work. But I was calling it creative because the industry told me it was creative. The industry told me this is innovative, this is different. And the irony wasn't lost on me. I was designing user experiences while my own experience was falling apart. I was designing user experiences while my own experiences were falling apart. I had to say that again because I was talking about human-centered design while completely ignoring what my own human within me was telling me through my body, my mood, my energy levels, and my stress. And my body was keeping the score. I had gained about 75 plus pounds of depression and stress weight over the years. 75 pounds, y'all. And that's not just a number on a scale, that's years of swallowing my truth. That's years of allowing myself to be and endure unhealthy relationships. That's years of stepping down my authentic voice and trying to just contort myself into shapes that weren't meant for me. That weight wasn't about food. I want to be really clear about that. It was about the weight of living out of alignment. It was about carrying the burden of performing a version of myself that wasn't real. It was about the heaviness of showing up to a job every single day that was slowly crushing my soul. I know I'm not alone on this recording. I know some of y'all have felt this. And I would sit in meetings talking about user personas and customer journeys while my own journey was leading me straight into burnout. Well, my own journey was not a quote unquote good user experience. I was facilitating workshops about innovation while feeling completely creatively bankrupt. I was presenting research about what users needed while completely ignoring what I needed. The hypocrisy of it all. It's so funny that we can look at other people and call them hypocrites for saying one thing and doing another. And yet I was literally just being a hypocrite, saying that I was all about user experiences and being human centered, but I wasn't even doing that with myself. And so the breaking point actually slowly started right before 2021. At the end of 2020, I ended up taking short-term medical leave because I felt like I was losing myself. I felt so disconnected from the things that I knew should have been giving me the sense of meaning and purpose. And so I took about 2.5 months off. And during those 2.5 months, I felt like I got clarity again. I felt like I got clarity on a few things. I feel like I got clarity on understanding who I was outside of what I can produce. I got clarity on what mattered to me, what I was passionate about. And it made me start to think, I don't know if I can go back to corporate working full time. At this time, Humanity Centered, my consulting business was already up and running and doing really well. And I was also working a full time job. So I was in that in the meantime space of working full time while building my dream. And so during this leave, I was like, I don't know if I can go back to that. I need to, I feel like I need to better myself. I feel like I need to try and pursue this business full time to see what can happen. And so it was about a week before I'm supposed to go back to corporate America. And I'm watching the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. Such a good movie. For those of you who don't know what that movie's about, this movie is about Fred Hampton, who was the leader of the Black Panthers in Chicago. True story. And it follows his journey, and it also follows the journey of how the FBI and the Chicago police worked together to assassinate him. And so I'm watching this movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, and there's this scene in the very beginning of the movie where you have a bunch of Black Chicagoans, and they're excited that a community college is about to be named after Malcolm X. And Fred Hampton gets up and he's, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. You think that's going to make you free? And I just had this moment that just clicked where I was like, yo, I'm not free. We're gonna give you this little ERG. Think that's gonna make you free? We're gonna give you this little raise. Think that's gonna make you free? We're gonna give you this company award. You think that's gonna make you free? I was like, yo, I'm not free. I'm not free. I am not free. At that moment, I started to recognize that my entire life had become work adjacent. Even my hobbies were things I did to decompress from work or to balance my work stress, but I wasn't really living. I was recovering from living. But here's what I wish someone had told me years ago in a way that I would have taken it to heart is that your body is keeping receipts on every choice you make that's going against your grain. And those receipts will be presented to you with interest, whether you're ready for them or not. So, right now, I want to share an activity that I've found myself doing over the years. And it's something that I also teach some of my coaching clients. And it's called the Body Truth Audit. And so, the way that you do this, and if you want to do this right now, is I want you to pause whatever you're doing and just do a full body scan. Start from the top of your head and work your way down. Asking yourself, noticing, where am I holding tension right now? Where are you holding tension? Where does my body feel heavy or tight or just off? And then I want you to think about your work situation. When you think about Monday morning, when you think about getting to the start of the week, what happens in your body? When you start to think about your boss or your biggest client or your most dreaded task, where do you feel that physically? And I want to be clear, your body is not lying to you. That knot in your stomach that you might be feeling isn't just stress, it's information. Those headaches aren't just from screen time, they're from the cognitive dissonance of living out of alignment. That fatigue, that chronic fatigue, isn't just from being busy and quote unquote tired. It's from giving our energy to things that don't give you energy back. And so for me, I had ignored these signals for years because I thought it was just a part of having a job. It was just a part of being in corporate. And I had a good job. I had a good paying job. And so I told myself I should be grateful. I thought that the physical symptoms were just part of being an adult with responsibilities. But gratitude for opportunities that are slowly killing you isn't virtue, it's self abandonment. Your body knows the difference between good stress and bad stress. It knows the difference between being challenged and being drained. It knows the difference between working hard towards something you actually care about and working hard to maintain something that doesn't serve you or cares about you at all. And so, my encouragement is to start listening to what your body's telling you because I imagine it's been trying to get your attention for longer than you think. Now, I want to pivot a little bit into, I'll just call the awakening nobody prepared me for. When I finally left corporate America in 2021, people kept asking me the same questions. What's your business plan? What are you hoping for humanity centered for your business over the next 5 years? And honestly, I didn't have answers to any of those questions. All I knew was that I needed to reclaim my agency and just the ability to make decisions about my life based on what felt right for me, not what looked good on LinkedIn or sound impressive at dinner parties or what was quote unquote expected of me, whether that was by people or by my family. That's a whole nother conversation that we'll get into another day about family stuff. Because I know for a lot of y'all, there are family expectations that are causing you and keeping you to endure. But here's what nobody tells you about leaving the traditional path. The hardest part isn't the practical stuff. It's not the financial uncertainty or the lack of health insurance or figuring out your own retirement plan. The hardest part is realizing and recognizing what got me here won't get me to where I want to go. And that can be a hard thing to sit with because when you think about what got you here, you think about all the hours you put in, you think about all the hustle you put in, you think about the sacrifices that have been made, the degrees, the talent, what have you. And now you're recognizing that won't get me to where I want to go. Now, initially, it can feel like, oh, does that mean I have to do even more of that crap that I hated and had to endure? But actually, I think it invites a level of lightness that a lot of us haven't been able to experience. The reason why a lot of us were grinding and hustling and running ourselves into the ground for so long is because we were focusing on a goal at the time. We were focusing on a point B at the time. And it was a worthwhile point B. There's a lot of promises and there was a lot of shimmer and glamour to that as well. But there's a cost to it for a lot of us. And the reality is the second leg of the journey now of becoming who I need to be to get where I want to go is actually a lot more of a freeing and healing experience. It's actually a lot more about regaining my agency again. That's a different kind of vibe, right? Going from where I was to where I am today did not have a level of agency and autonomy that I needed. But now going from where I am today to where I want to go and who I can be, there's nothing but agency sprinkled all over that. An agency isn't just about being your own boss, though that's a part of it. I know plenty of entrepreneurs who are more trapped than their corporate counterparts because they've built businesses that own them instead of serve them. That's the key. There's a lot of people who are running into entrepreneurship who are literally running from one rat race into the other. That's because of a lot of things, but one of the things is a lack of understanding of agency. For me, agency meant being able to wake up and design my day around my energy, not someone else's meeting schedule. It meant being able to say no to projects that paid well but felt wrong in my body and would crush my spirit. It meant being able to take 3 weeks off without having to ask permission or feel guilty or worry about my job security. This is something I actually do for Humanity Centered. We call it Rest Month. Within Humanity Centered, I have baked in mandatory times of rest for my team. We have a week off in the spring and a week off in the fall that I call Rest and Resist Week. We tell our clients they can't talk to us, we're not available. Then we have 3 weeks off in the summer that we call Rest Month. And I bake that in because of how important that is in terms of taking care of myself, my team, and protecting the vision that I have for my life. Because having autonomy, true autonomy, has meant something deeper. It meant being able to make decisions based on my values instead of my fears. A lot of you who are listening are living a life based off of your fears, the things you don't want to do and you don't want to be, versus your values and actually what you care about and what makes you excited. I didn't want to make decisions anymore that were based off of my fears. And in corporate, I made a lot of decisions through the lens of what will keep me safe? What will keep me employed? What will keep me in good standing? And those are bad questions, but when they're the only questions you're asking, you end up building a life that's incredibly unfulfilling, where you start to choose comfort over courage, and the cost of that starts to catch up to you. And so when I started asking different questions, what feels alive? What am I curious about? What would I do if I wasn't afraid of failing? Everything changed. Hey, this is Vivianne, and I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. And I just wanted to pause for a quick moment to say that this podcast is ad-free on purpose. And we want to keep it that way so that it feels like a space that's just for us and just a little bit more divorced from noise on what we should buy and what we should consume. And so the best way to help us do that is by sharing it with someone you think would really connect with it, someone who you think would feel encouraged or get something out of this episode, or by leaving an honest review because it helps more folks find us. And honestly, it could be the exact thing someone else needed to hear today, just because you took a moment to spread the word. So thanks for being here. I appreciate you, and let's get back to it. The first few months of entrepreneurship, full-time entrepreneurship, felt like a masterclass in sitting with uncertainty. I would wake up some mornings with no idea of what to work on. It's weird initially because your time is actually your own. You're like, oh, I don't have to ask permission from anyone to do what I want with my time. It's a different vibe. I had no boss giving me assignments. I had no meetings to structure my day. I had no external validation to tell me I was doing well. And so it was a little disorienting, but it was also incredibly liberating at the same time. Ooh, one thing I want to talk about is the unexpected level of grief that came. So when I'm talking to a lot of my coaching clients and they have just left maybe their corporate job, I always warn them that somewhere around between day 30 and 60, you'll start to feel something different. Those first 30 days, you're like, I'm free, I did it. And you're just a little bit on a high. But around between day 30 and 60, some of the grief starts to set in. Some of the trauma starts to surface. And part of that is because a lot of times our minds and our bodies will push down feelings and emotions and memories of trauma and grief until it feels like we're safe enough to process it. And so I talk to a lot of people where around that 30 to 60 day mark, they start to feel the grief that they had to push down in order to endure and survive. And so what happens in this moment is you start to pay attention to things that you had ignored for years. Even small things like, what time of day do I feel most creative? What kind of work makes me lose track of time in a good way? What problems do I actually care about solving? And I discovered that I was most creative earlier in the morning before the world woke up. I discovered that I love the strategy and big picture thinking of helping organizations with their organizational culture, with helping leaders and managers become more trauma informed and curious about care, not only for their teams, but also for themselves. But I hated the politics and the bureaucracy. And I discovered that I was energized by helping other people navigate their own career transitions, specifically into entrepreneurship, specifically into betting on themselves, probably because I was living through one myself. But this is where we get uncomfortably honest about who you are versus who you think you're supposed to be. And so I want to share with you an exercise that I've done before, an exercise that I've also walked through with some of my coaching clients. And I call it, do I have a name for this? I guess I call it the Identity Archeology Dig. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Names mean nothing. It's more about the activity in and of itself. But what I want you to do is I want you to finish this sentence in 10 different ways. I am someone who, dot, 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 fill in the blank. 10 times, write this sentence 10 times with different answers. I don't want you to think too hard about it. I just want you to let whatever comes up come up. And I want you to go back to each of those statements and ask, is this true because it's authentically me or because it's what I've been rewarded for? Is this who I am or who I learned to be to survive in systems that didn't make space for the real me? Ooh, it's a powerful activity, y'all. For example, I used to say, I'm someone who is always reliable and never lets people down. But when I really examined that, I realized it wasn't coming from where I thought it was coming from. It was actually coming from a fear of disappointing people and losing their approval. And I've done enough therapy work to know that there's some childhood stuff packed into that. But but yeah, it was coming from a place of fear of disappointing others and losing potentially their approval. But the real me is someone who cares deeply about showing up for people I love and care about. But I also have boundaries, right? And I don't need to sacrifice my well being to manage other people's emotions. I used to say I'm someone who is logical and strategic. But what I discovered was that I'm actually someone who's deeply intuitive and makes better decisions when I trust my gut than when I am over analyzing everything. So, this process of separating your authentic self from your performed self is crucial because you can't build a brave life on a foundation of who you think you should be. You got to shed that. It's hard work, but it's good work. Here's another part of this exercise if you're curious. I want you to think back to who you were before you learned to be professional, whatever your understanding of that is. Before you learn to network and build your personal brand and optimize your LinkedIn profile, whatever, what did you love doing as a kid? What problems did you naturally want to solve? What made you lose track of time? What did people compliment you on that had nothing to do with productivity or achievement? For me, I remember that I used to love writing stories. I used to love asking people deep questions about their lives. I was that inquisitive, annoying kid who always just had a bunch of questions, who's always so curious. I loved analyzing different patterns and even helping people see themselves more clearly as I think about who I was in my college years. And none of that was in my job description in corporate America, but all of that is central to who I am and what I do now. But also, I want to be clear in terms of my clarity of who I am and what I do now. There was a decent amount of healing work that happened, but there's a level of and a flavor of healing work that nobody talks about. So let me be real with you about something that most entrepreneurship content completely glosses over, and that is none of this transformation happens without doing the deep healing work. And a messy, uncomfortable kind of healing work. I'm talking about the healing work that's not cute. Talking about the healing work that is required because maybe at one point you thought you had healed from something, but in reality, you were just busy. And so I did the long overdue healing work with my therapist. In order to build something that is different from the life and experience you had, I think therapy is incredibly and deeply important in this journey. We're not doing any of this brave life building without professional support because the patterns that got you trapped in the wrong life run very, very deep. So here's a couple things I discovered in therapy. I had been living my entire adult life trying to prove that I deserve to take up space. Every achievement, every promotion, every external validation was me saying to myself, see, I'm worthy of being here. See, I'm enough. I'm valuable. I matter. But when you're constantly trying to prove your worth, you're operating from a fundamental belief that you don't have inherent value, that you are not more than what you produce. And that belief will sabotage every brave choice, every courageous choice you could ever try to make. And so I trace this back to childhood, like most things. I was a kid who learned early on that being good, quote unquote good, got me attention and got me love. I was the kid who figured out that achieving things made adults, specifically my mom, more proud of me, more intentional, more affirming to me. I was a kid who internalized the message that my value was directly tied to my performance. Just to give you an idea of how deep this runs, my mom is not someone who I would describe as a words of affirmation person. And my mom's been through a lot, so I can understand how she showed up in my life. But as an adult, I now recognize I don't need to excuse the behavior and some of the things that she did. Nonetheless, when my mom growing up, when I had these moments of praise and acknowledgement, I treasured them because they didn't come around that often. And so I remember in elementary school, I had done something really cool. And my mom got me this small figurine. It's this little like black girl, and she's holding this banner that says, "You go, girl." Now I'm in my mid early 30s. And when I was packing my stuff for Mexico and getting rid of stuff, I've always known that I still have this figurine, y'all. I've been carrying around this figurine since I was 10 years old. That's 25-ish years of carrying this thing around throughout college, all the moves, all like, y'all, I still have this freaking figurine. That's how deep this runs. And I still brought it with me to Mexico because as I've learned in therapy, it's also important to, if you had a parent or an upbringing where there's a lot of trauma, it's really important to still remember and acknowledge some of those good times too. So that's why I still keep it. And these messages of my values tied directly to performance, whatever, served me well in school and in early career stages. But it was slowly killing me as an adult because I had never fully learned and embraced how to separate my worth from my work. If you're familiar with some of my work now and who I am now, I've done a lot of work, y'all, to get to this point, and it's been a journey. And in therapy, I had to confront some hard truths about myself. I had to recognize that even though I am someone who I love caring about people, I love helping others. A lot of times I would do so at the expense of myself. I had to confront some hard truths in that I had a really hard time articulating and knowing what I wanted, let alone what I needed. I had just lost a level of connection and intimacy in my relationship with myself that I needed to develop and get back. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when my therapist asked me, what would it feel like to live as if your life actually belonged to you? And honestly, it started to make me think about when was the last time I had made a decision based purely on what felt right for me. And so the healing work also meant learning how to ask for help and be vulnerable with people who cared about me. And this was huge for me because I had been the person everyone came to for support, but I never let anyone support me back. Actually, there's a point in my career where I was in a really toxic and abusive relationship. And I actually kept it from my two best friends, in part because I felt protective of this person, quote unquote, wanting to help them be better, to try and work on our relationship. But also, I really just struggled asking for help. I struggled to admit I'm not okay, that I need support, and that I can't carry this all on my own. And so, as I reflect on my healing journey, actually, that moment was when a lot of things started to change. So, this was for me early 2019. At this point, I'm in the thick of it with my career in UX. I've been speaking at conferences, I've been doing all this stuff. And a lot of people didn't know how much I was suffering and struggling. Yeah, early 2019 was when a lot of things started to actually change for me. And as a former therapist, like, you have the training, you understand these dynamics relationships, but we're also still people. We're also still going through our own healing journey. And I think we just have these different moments in life where we recognize that there's need for more depth, that there's need for more honesty, more vulnerability, more candor, so that we can move closer to the person that we were designed and created to be. So in early 2019, I shared with my two best friends what was really happening and got help, got out, started to heal, started to learn how to grieve, started to see what was possible within myself. And in 2020, that's when I started my first business. And I feel like I've been on a slow bloom, on a slow up and up ever since. But yeah, healing work is about admitting and knowing how to acknowledge when things are off, you need help. I hope you take this as a sign to reach out for help, to get the support that you need, to acknowledge that you are worth being seen and you don't have to endure any more or any longer than you have to. And so the healing work has meant for me learning how to ask for help and be vulnerable with people who cared about me, who I knew loved me, but just really struggled, right? I know a lot of y'all understand. I knew they cared about me and they loved me. And I have been robbing myself for so many years to experience that kind of love and care from them. And those relationships are so much more stronger. They're more beautiful. They're deeper. They're Like, I wouldn't trade those friendships for the world. This was huge for me because I'd been the person everyone came to for support, even when I was young, but I never let anyone support me back. And that's a key thing there. I could have created opportunities to allow people to support me and hold me, but I didn't. I was a friend who would listen to everyone's problems, but never shared my own. I was a colleague who would take on extra work to help the team, but never ask for help when I was overwhelmed. Learning to be vulnerable was like learning a new language. I had to practice saying, I'm not okay, or I need help, or I don't know what to do. Y'all, I was having a wake up call in this season. The people who loved me could see what I was denying to myself. I also had to remove myself from unhealthy relationships, environments, and habits. Some of these were obvious. The job that was killing me, the people who only wanted to be around me just so they could take what I could offer, but they didn't want to give back. But some were more subtle, even like the habit of checking my phone first thing in the morning, which immediately put me in reactive mode instead of intentional mode. The pattern of saying yes to things I didn't want to do because I was afraid of disappointing people or missing out. The way I talked to myself in my head, like I was my own worst enemy instead of my own best friend. Y'all, we have to learn how to be more kind to ourselves, how to be our own best friend. And as we get older, it's tougher to do, but it's not too late. It's not too late. I think one of the hardest things that I had to learn was to recognize the difference between people who loved me for me and the people who loved what I could do for them. And that's a painful but necessary distinction. And so, with that, I kind of want to just invite you into a time for some brutal honesty about the relationships in your life, including your relationship with yourself. One exercise that I do with myself as well as with other people I work with is it's an exercise that might sting a little bit, but I think it's necessary if you want to build a life that's actually yours. And so the way that I do this is I make 4 different kinds of lists. And here's what I have in each of the lists. Number 1 is your true supporters. So these are the people who celebrate who you're becoming, not just what you've achieved. On this list, I'm thinking about when was the last time I was genuinely vulnerable with these people? When was the last time I asked them for support or admitted I was struggling? And if I haven't, why not? What am I afraid will happen if I let them see the real me? So that's list 1. Write a list of your supporters. Again, these are people where you have been able to actually be vulnerable with, where you actually felt supported and cared for when you were struggling. Your true supporters. The second list is what I call the transactional relationships. So these are people who only seem interested in you when you're useful to them. Some questions on this list include, what would happen if you stopped being useful to these people? If you couldn't offer them connections or opportunities or emotional labor, would these relationships survive? And I encourage you to be honest as you're listing out these relationships, even if it's painful and even if it's starting to show you a truth that you don't want to yet receive. The third list is what I will call the energy vampires. These are people who actively drain your energy or make you feel like you need to perform. So, questions around this list include things like, what would it cost you to set boundaries with these people or remove them from your life entirely? What is it costing you to keep them? And I want you to calculate the emotional labor, the time, the energy you spend managing these relationships. And the fourth list that I have, the fourth and final, is I title it My Safe People. These are the people who make you feel like you can be your full and true self, messiness and all. So on this list, I have questions like, how much time are you actually spending with these people? Are you prioritizing these relationships or are you letting them get squeezed out by more demanding, less nourishing connections? So again, 4 lists, your true supporters, the transactional relationships, the energy vampires, and your safe people. And here's what I learned, that the hardest part of building a brave and courageous life is admitting that some relationships are only working because you're betraying yourself to maintain them. And another truth that I've had to realize over time is there are some people that I have had to distance myself from because they were only compatible with the less healed version of myself. And again, this is just a reminder that healing is not cute. 0 out of 5 stars, some of these seasons of healing, okay? I had to walk away from one of my best friends that I really cared about and loved because I recognized how he was treating me. So painful. That actually took a couple years to work through and get over. I had to start to have boundaries with some family members who were just frankly abusive and create more distance between me and them. And this doesn't just apply to people. This can apply to relationship with industries, with communities. As someone who is a former therapist who switched into UX, I made the switch with the belief that they actually cared about being human-centered. But I've never been in an industry where I experienced so much racism and hypocrisy around actually caring about people. And so I left. I left. And even though that might have seemed like a wild choice to do, well known in my career, writing for Fast Company Fortune, was invited to speak and be recognized at Fortune's Most Powerful Women Next Gen conference, won awards, companies flying me all over to work with them in their UX teams. I realized none of that actually freaking mattered. It didn't matter. I matter. I have to be more intentional, more loving, more kind, and more caring to myself. And so I walked away from the UX industry. I feel like there's a lot more I can say about that experience. That would probably need to be its own separate podcast episode where I would spill all the tea, all the stories. There's so much that people have no idea the cost that being in this industry has had on me. But all that to say, as I look at my life now, as I look at what has happened when I decided to actually do the deep healing work, and I would say for me, it was about a good 2 years of doing that work. When I look at the scary decisions that I had to make, but I knew was the right decision to make, when I reflect on the ways that my body started to heal as my health got better, as I started to work out, as I started to be more intentional with being loving and kind to my physical self, as I reflect on all those things and now being on the other side of it, so grateful. So grateful. I have this bracelet, this rubber band bracelet, the silicone band bracelets. I made a custom one that says focus on today. Because in the beginning of that healing journey, I was in such a dark place and y'all would have never known. But that's just decades of survival skills being put into play. But I made this silicone bracelet that said focus on today because when you're in a big healing season, when you're in a big life pivot kind of moment, you do have to focus on it day by day by day, because that will also allow you to be more kind to yourself during that 24-hour period. It allows you to recognize small wins and to celebrate small wins, and it allows you to be grateful. But I had to focus on it just at the day. And especially when I was in this very deep, deep bout of depression, I had to focus on the one day in front of me because that's all I had control over. And yeah, I guess I'll wrap this up by just saying I love my life. And I haven't been able to say that in a really long time. And it's a vibe. It's a vibe. And I'd invite you to start to make the decisions, to start to bet on yourself, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's messy, even if it's uncertain, because you too deserve to love your life. Thanks for hanging out with us and diving into some of these real and unfiltered conversations. We know your time is valuable, and so we don't take it for granted. If today's episode made you think, if it challenged you, or gave you something new to consider, we'd love for you to hit that follow button on whatever streaming service you're using. That way, you'll never miss an episode when we drop them. And if you want to go even deeper, sign up for our newsletter at choosecourageinc.com, and you'll get updates on new episodes, access to exclusive freebies, and first dibs on coaching opportunities and other resources to help you make bold moves in your life and business. So we appreciate you, we see you, and we're rooting for you. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort, and a friendly reminder to drink some water.